What if I told you that everything you've forgotten is more powerful than everything you remember? What if the reason you can't recall your dreams, the reason certain memories vanish like smoke, the reason you walk into rooms and forget why you came, isn't because your mind is weak, but because there's a cosmic library inside your skull that's been deliberately locked away? The ancient Egyptians called it the Duat, the other world that exists between sleeping and waking. The Greeks named it Mnemosyne, the river of memory that flows through dimensions. But the Vedic seers knew the deepest truth. Your forgotten memories aren't lost. They're archived, stored in a vast, multidimensional palace that exists beyond the reach of your everyday consciousness. You've been walking through life with amnesia, convinced you're just a small, limited being stumbling through an indifferent universe. But what if you're actually a cosmic librarian who simply forgot the location of their own infinite archive? This isn't metaphor. This isn't mysticism. This is the architecture of consciousness itself. And once you understand how to access it, you'll never see reality the same way again. For thousands of years, masterminds from Tibet to Alexandria have known this secret. Memory isn't just about the past. Memory is the technology through which consciousness creates reality. What you remember shapes what you perceive. What you perceive becomes what you experience. And what you experience becomes what you are. The Hermetic texts speak of the Akashic records, an energetic library containing every thought, emotion, and event that has ever occurred. But here's what they never told you. You don't just access the Akashic records. You are an Akashic record. Your consciousness is a living, breathing, cosmic database, and every forgotten memory is a doorway to a different version of reality. Think about this. You have memories from when you were 5 years old, but the body you had then is completely gone. Every cell has been replaced multiple times, so where do those memories actually live? Not in your brain, not in your body. They exist in the field of consciousness itself, stored in what quantum physicists are beginning to recognize as the zero-point field, the infinite information matrix that underlies all of reality. The ancient mystery schools understood this. They developed techniques not just to remember the past, but to access memories that technically weren't even theirs. Past lives, ancestral wisdom, species-wide knowledge, even memories from futures that haven't happened yet. Because in the palace of consciousness, time isn't linear, it's holographic. Every moment contains every other moment, and every memory is a seed of infinite possibility. This is why meditation masters can suddenly know things they never learned, why children sometimes speak languages they've never heard, why you sometimes have conversations with people and feel like you've had the exact same conversation before, in another lifetime, in another world. The Tibetan bardo Thodol describes consciousness as a vast mansion with countless rooms. Most people live in just one room their entire lives, convinced that's all there is. But the awakened ones learn to walk through walls, to open doors they didn't even know existed, to explore chambers filled with wisdom, power, and memories that stretch back to the beginning of time itself. Your forgotten dreams aren't random neural static. They're glimpses into these other rooms. Every night when your logical mind finally shuts up, your consciousness naturally begins to wander through the palace. You meet versions of yourself from different timelines. You receive teachings from masters who died centuries ago. You download information from futures you're still creating. But here's where it gets truly extraordinary. You can learn to do this while awake. The ancient Greeks had a practice called anamnesis, the recovery of knowledge that the soul always possessed but had forgotten. Socrates demonstrated this by helping an uneducated slave boy discover complex geometric principles he had never been taught. The knowledge was already there, waiting to be remembered. Indian yogis developed even more sophisticated techniques. Through specific combinations of breath, sound, and intention, they learned to access what they called sanskaras, not just personal memories, but cosmic memories. Memories of how the universe was created. Memories of what they were before they became human. Memories of futures they were destined to fulfill. The Sufi mystics spoke of dhikr, remembrance of the divine. But this wasn't just religious devotion. It was a precise technology for awakening dormant chambers in the palace of consciousness. Through repetitive sacred phrases, they would literally vibrate their awareness into expanded states where forgotten knowledge would spontaneously arise. Even the medieval alchemists understood this principle. Their famous memory palaces weren't just organizational tools. They were maps of consciousness itself. By learning to navigate imaginary architectural spaces, they were actually learning to navigate the dimensional structure of their own awareness. But here's the part that will change everything you think you know about your own mind. These aren't just ancient practices. Modern neuroscience is beginning to discover that consciousness operates exactly like these mystery schools described. Your brain isn't creating your memories, it's receiving them. Like a radio tuning into different stations, your consciousness can be trained to access different frequency bands of memory and information. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research into morphic resonance suggests that memories and knowledge patterns exist in fields that transcend individual brains. Dr. Ian Stevenson's decades of research into children who remember past lives indicates that memory can somehow transfer between bodies. Even mainstream neuroscientists are starting to acknowledge that consciousness might not be produced by the brain, but rather filtered through it. What if the reason you can't remember your early childhood isn't because those memories are gone, but because you've been conditioned to access only a narrow band of your total memory spectrum? What if the reason you forget your dreams isn't because they're meaningless, but because they contain information your conscious mind isn't ready to handle? The ancient seers knew that forgetting is as much a choice as remembering. You forget things that don't match your current identity. You forget possibilities that seem too impossible. You forget power that feels too dangerous. You forget love that seems too vast. You forget yourself when the truth of what you are becomes too overwhelming for your limited self-concept to contain. But what if you could remember it all? What if you could access the total memory palace of your consciousness and reclaim every piece of wisdom, every moment of power, every fragment of love that you've ever experienced or ever will experience? Here's the first key. Your breath is the doorway. The ancient pranayama techniques weren't just about relaxation. They were about changing your brainwave states to access different memory banks. When you breathe in a specific rhythm, 4 counts in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, you create a coherent state where your consciousness naturally begins to expand beyond its usual boundaries. The second key is sound. The Vedic mantras weren't just spiritual practices. They were acoustic technologies designed to activate specific regions of your memory palace. The sound Om vibrates at the same frequency as the Earth's electromagnetic field. When you chant it with focused intention, you're literally tuning your consciousness to access planetary memory, the collective knowledge stored in the Earth's energy field itself. The third key is visualization, but not the way most people think. You're not creating imaginary images. You're learning to navigate actual dimensional spaces that exist in consciousness. Start by imagining a door. Not any door, the entrance to your own personal memory palace. See it clearly, feel its texture, hear the sound it makes when you open it, and then step through. On the other side of that door lies everything you've ever forgotten, every dream that slipped away, every moment of clarity that you couldn't quite hold on to, every flash of genius that disappeared before you could capture it, every feeling of connection to something vast and infinite that you dismissed as imagination. But also waiting there are memories that technically aren't yours, but somehow belong to you anyway. Knowledge that your ancestors accumulated, wisdom that your future self has learned, information that's stored in the collective unconscious of humanity itself. The ancient mystery schools called this process theosis, becoming divine. But they didn't mean becoming something other than human. They meant remembering what human actually is, remembering that you are a cosmic being, temporarily focused through a biological form, remembering that your consciousness extends far beyond the boundaries of your individual personality. Here's what the masters discovered. When you learn to navigate your memory palace consciously, reality itself becomes more malleable. Because memories aren't just about the past, they're about what's possible. Every time you remember something that seemed impossible, you expand your sense of what's actually available to you right now. This is why people who practice these techniques begin to experience what others call miracles. They remember their power to heal. They remember their ability to know things without being told. They remember their capacity to influence reality through consciousness alone. They remember that they are not separate from the universe. They are the universe remembering itself through a human nervous system. But here's the most profound secret of all. You don't have to wait for some special initiation or years of training to access this. Your memory palace is always there, always accessible, always waiting for you to remember that you have the key. Right now, as you read these words, there's a part of you that remembers everything, that knows why you chose to incarnate at this particular moment in human history, that understands your purpose, your power, your true identity. That part of you is whispering to you right now, trying to remind you of something you've forgotten. Can you hear it? Can you feel that gentle stirring of recognition, that sense of remembering something vast and important that was always there, just beneath the surface of your everyday awareness? The memory palace of the gods isn't some distant mystical realm. It's the true architecture of your own consciousness. And the gods aren't beings outside of you. They're the aspects of yourself that you've forgotten how to access. The door is open. The invitation has been extended. The only question now is, will you remember who you really are?